December 1939. The forests of Finland were silent under a thick blanket of snow. The temperature had dropped far below freezing, and the wind moved slowly through the endless rows of frozen trees. For most soldiers, this kind of cold would have been unbearable. But on this battlefield, the cold itself had become a weapon. The Soviet Union had just launched a massive invasion of Finland. Thousands of soldiers were marching across the border, supported by tanks, artillery, and overwhelming numbers. The Finnish army was much smaller. They had fewer weapons, fewer soldiers, and far fewer resources. But they had something the invading army did not. They knew the land. They knew the forests. And hidden somewhere within those forests was a soldier who would soon become a legend. His name was Simo Häyhä. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about him. He was a quiet farmer from Finland, a man who had spent most of his life hunting in the forests near his home. He was not a large man. He was not loud or aggressive. In fact, many people described him as calm, patient, and almost invisible in a crowd. But on the battlefield, those exact qualities would make him one of the most feared snipers in history. Because in the frozen forests of Finland, Soviet soldiers began noticing something strange. Men were falling. One by one. No one could see where the shots were coming from. There were no flashes. No visible sniper nests. Just silence. And then another soldier would fall into the snow. At first, Soviet commanders believed they were dealing with multiple Finnish snipers working together. That seemed like the only possible explanation. Their soldiers were being targeted with incredible precision. Anyone who exposed themselves in the open even for just a moment risked becoming the next casualty. Panic slowly spread among the Soviet units moving through the forests. Some soldiers began to whisper about an invisible sniper. Others believed they were being watched constantly. The problem was simple. No one could find the shooter. Snipers usually revealed themselves eventually. A glint from a rifle scope. Movement in the trees. A small cloud of breath in the freezing air. But this sniper left almost no trace. The shots were accurate, fast, and perfectly timed. Meanwhile, hidden somewhere in the snow-covered forest, Simo Häyhä remained perfectly still. He wore white camouflage that blended completely with the winter landscape. He had carefully packed snow around his position to stabilize his rifle. Even the way he breathed had been controlled to avoid revealing his location. Hours passed without movement. Sometimes entire days. Simo Häyhä had the patience of a hunter, and he waited. What made Häyhä even more difficult to locate was his unusual choice of weapon. Most snipers relied on rifles equipped with scopes. Scopes allowed them to see distant targets more clearly. But scopes also had a dangerous weakness. When sunlight reflected off the glass lens, it could reveal the sniper's position. Häyhä avoided this risk completely. Instead of using a scope, he used simple iron sights. This forced him to get closer to his targets, but it also made him far harder to detect. He also kept snow in his mouth while waiting in position. This prevented warm breath from creating visible vapor in the freezing air. Every detail mattered. Every movement was calculated. And slowly, the number of Soviet casualties began to grow. Day after day, Soviet soldiers entered the forest. Day after day, some of them never came back. The legend of the invisible sniper began spreading through the Soviet ranks. They gave him a name. The White Death. Because somewhere in the endless snow, death was watching them, and no one could find him. As the days passed, Soviet commanders began to realize that the mysterious sniper hidden in the Finnish forests was not just a minor problem. He was becoming a serious threat. Reports from the front lines described the same strange pattern over and over again. Soldiers moving through the snow would suddenly collapse without warning. Patrol units sent into the forest would return with fewer men than they started with. And every time investigators tried to locate the source of the shots, they found nothing. No footprints. No sniper nest. No movement. Just the quiet forest. The Soviet army had expected the invasion of Finland to be quick and decisive. They believed their massive numbers and superior equipment would overwhelm the smaller Finnish forces within days. Instead, the war had turned into a nightmare. The Finnish soldiers were using the terrain to their advantage. Small groups of fighters moved silently through the forests, launching sudden attacks before disappearing again. But even among these skilled fighters, one man was becoming legendary: Simo Häyhä. Day after day, he remained hidden in the frozen landscape, patiently waiting for opportunities. When Soviet soldiers appeared in the open, even for a brief moment, he would take the shot. Then silence returned to the forest. The soldiers who survived began to whisper among themselves. They believed the forest itself was hunting them. Eventually, Soviet commanders made a decision. If one sniper was causing this much damage, then the solution seemed obvious. They would send their own snipers to eliminate him. Special sniper teams were deployed into the forests with one clear mission: find and eliminate the invisible Finnish shooter. These men were highly trained marksmen. Many of them had experience in previous battles and were considered among the best shooters in the Soviet army. But the forests of Finland were unlike any battlefield they had experienced before. The snow was deep. The temperatures were brutal. And the silence made every movement dangerous. One by one, the Soviet snipers began searching for their target. But something unexpected began happening. Instead of finding Häyhä, they were the ones being found. Hidden among the trees, Simo Häyhä watched patiently. His years as a hunter had trained him to observe even the smallest movements in the forest. A shadow moving between trees, a branch bending slightly under weight, a faint sound carried by the cold wind. These details were enough. One shot. Another sniper disappeared into the snow. Then silence returned again. Frustrated by their inability to locate the sniper, Soviet commanders escalated their efforts. If snipers could not eliminate him, they would use something far more destructive: artillery. Large artillery batteries were ordered to fire into the suspected areas where the sniper might be hiding. Explosions shook the forests as shells slammed into the snow-covered ground. Entire sections of the forest were blasted apart. Trees shattered. Snow and dirt were thrown high into the freezing air. The goal was simple. If they could not find the sniper, they would destroy everything around him. But even this strategy failed. After the bombardment stopped, Soviet soldiers cautiously moved through the damaged forest. They expected to find the sniper dead among the debris. Instead, the shooting started again. Somewhere in the forest, Simo Häyhä had survived. And once again, no one could see where the shots were coming from. The legend of the White Death grew even stronger. Among Soviet troops, fear began to spread. Because now they believed something terrifying. This was not just a sniper. It was a ghost in the snow. By the middle of the Winter War, the mysterious sniper hidden in the forests of Finland had already become a legend among Finnish soldiers. His name was spoken with respect: Simo Häyhä. Reports coming from the front lines told an incredible story. Day after day, the number of Soviet casualties attributed to a single sniper continued to rise. At first, many officers believed the reports were exaggerated. War often creates rumors, and stories can quickly grow larger than reality. But the numbers kept increasing. Week after week, Finnish commanders carefully recorded confirmed sniper hits. The results were astonishing. Simo Häyhä was eliminating enemy soldiers at a rate that few snipers in history had ever achieved. Some days he remained completely still, waiting patiently for the perfect moment. Other days, he moved quietly through the forest, choosing new positions where he could observe Soviet patrol routes. The harsh winter conditions that made life miserable for most soldiers had become one of his greatest advantages. The deep snow muffled sound. The cold air slowed movement. And the endless white landscape allowed him to disappear completely. For the Soviet soldiers moving through those forests, the battlefield had become unpredictable. They never knew when they were being watched, or when the next shot would come. As the weeks passed, the confirmed numbers became almost unbelievable. By the end of the Winter War, Simo Häyhä had achieved something extraordinary. He had recorded over 500 confirmed sniper hits. More than 500 enemy soldiers eliminated by a single sniper in just a few months. Even today, historians consider this one of the most remarkable records in military history. What made the achievement even more astonishing was the time frame. The Winter War lasted only about 100 days. That meant Häyhä averaged several successful shots almost every single day of the conflict. And remember, he was doing all of this without using a rifle scope. He relied only on iron sights and his incredible patience. He waited for the perfect moment. He chose his positions carefully. And he fired only when he knew the shot would count. Because of this deadly efficiency, Soviet commanders began to see him as more than just a sniper. He had become a serious strategic threat. Entire units were forced to move more slowly and cautiously through the forests. Fear was spreading. Soon the legend of the White Death spread far beyond the battlefield. Soviet soldiers began warning new units arriving at the front. They described an invisible sniper hiding somewhere in the forests. A man who never missed. A ghost that could not be found. Some commanders even began offering rewards to any soldier who could locate and eliminate the mysterious sniper. But despite these efforts, no one succeeded. Simo Häyhä continued operating in the forests, calm and patient as always. For him, the war was not about becoming famous. He was simply defending his homeland. Finland was a small nation facing a powerful enemy. Every soldier was doing what they could to protect their country. But even among those soldiers, Häyhä had become something extraordinary. A hunter in the snow. A silent guardian of the forest. And somewhere out there, hidden beneath the white camouflage, the most dangerous sniper in the world was still watching the battlefield. Waiting for the next movement. Waiting for the next mistake. For months, the forests of Finland had hidden a soldier that the Soviet army could not find. Patrols searched. Snipers hunted. Artillery bombarded entire sections of the forest. Yet somehow, the mysterious sniper known as the White Death continued to survive. But war is unpredictable. And even the most careful soldier cannot control every moment on the battlefield. In early March of 1940, during one of the final stages of the Winter War, something happened that changed everything. Simo Häyhä had returned to one of his hidden positions near the front line. Like many times before, he had prepared his firing location carefully. Snow was packed around his rifle to stabilize it. His white camouflage blended perfectly into the frozen landscape. The forest around him was quiet. But somewhere nearby, Soviet soldiers were moving through the trees. The moment passed quickly. A sudden flash. A sharp sound cutting through the silence. Then everything went dark. For the first time during the war, the White Death had been hit. A Soviet soldier had fired a shot that struck Häyhä directly in the face. The impact was devastating. The bullet shattered part of his jaw and knocked him unconscious instantly. In the frozen snow of the Finnish forest, the most feared sniper of the war lay completely still. The battle around him continued. Gunfire echoed through the forest as Finnish and Soviet soldiers fought across the snowy landscape. Hours later, Finnish soldiers moving through the area noticed something unusual in the snow. A body. At first, they believed it was another fallen soldier. But when they looked closer, they recognized the uniform. And then the face. Or what was left of it. It was Simo Häyhä, the man who had become a legend across the battlefield. His injuries were severe. Blood had frozen in the cold air around his face. His jaw had been badly damaged, and he showed no sign of movement. Many soldiers believed he was already dead. Still, they carried him away from the battlefield as quickly as possible. He was transported to a military hospital where doctors immediately began emergency treatment. The situation was critical. The damage from the bullet was catastrophic. For days, doctors worked to stabilize him. Across the front lines, rumors spread quickly. Some soldiers said the White Death had finally been killed. Others refused to believe it. The legend had become so powerful that many thought he was impossible to defeat. But the story of Simo Häyhä was not over yet. In the hospital, doctors fought to save his life. His injuries were extremely serious. The bullet had caused massive damage to his face, and the swelling made it difficult for him to breathe. For days, he remained unconscious. Many believed he would never wake up again. But then something remarkable happened. On March 13, 1940, the exact day the Winter War officially ended, Simo Häyhä opened his eyes. The doctors were stunned. After suffering one of the most devastating injuries imaginable, he had survived. The man the enemy had called the White Death was still alive. Recovery would take a long time. His face would never look the same again. But against all expectations, the most feared sniper of the war had lived through the very battle that almost killed him. And the legend of Simo Häyhä became even greater. Because now his story was not only about skill, it was also about survival. When the Winter War finally ended in March of 1940, Finland had survived one of the most difficult moments in its history. The country had faced one of the largest military powers in the world and managed to resist the invasion far longer than anyone expected. The war had been brutal. Thousands of soldiers had fought across frozen forests, icy lakes, and snow-covered battlefields. Among those soldiers was a man whose story had already begun spreading far beyond the front lines. Simo Häyhä, the sniper the Soviet soldiers had called the White Death. While many soldiers returned home quietly after the war, Häyhä's name had already become legendary among the Finnish people. Stories about the invisible sniper who had defended the forests of Finland spread quickly. Soldiers who had fought alongside him described his calm personality and incredible patience. Despite everything he had done during the war, Häyhä never behaved like a celebrity or a hero seeking attention. In fact, he remained a very quiet man. He rarely spoke about the war. When people asked him about his incredible record as a sniper, his answers were often simple and direct. He once explained his success with just a few words. He said he simply did what he had been trained to do. Nothing more. Nothing less. Recovery from his injuries took years. The bullet that struck his face had caused permanent damage, and surgeons had to reconstruct much of his jaw. Even after surviving the war, the physical reminders of that final battle remained with him for the rest of his life. Yet Häyhä adapted to his new life with the same quiet determination that had defined him during the war. He returned to the Finnish countryside. There, he lived a peaceful life surrounded by nature. Hunting once again became one of his favorite activities. The forests, where he had once fought a war, became places of calm and solitude. For many years, journalists and historians tried to interview him. They wanted to understand how one man could achieve something so extraordinary during such a short and brutal conflict. But Häyhä rarely gave long explanations. He believed his actions during the war were simply part of defending his homeland. Nothing more. Nothing less. To him, the real heroes of the war were the soldiers who never returned home. As the decades passed, the legend of Simo Häyhä only continued to grow. Military historians studied the tactics he used in the forests of Finland. Snipers around the world analyzed his methods and discipline. His ability to remain perfectly still for hours, his use of natural camouflage, and his decision to avoid rifle scopes all became examples of how patience and simplicity could outperform advanced equipment. Today, many experts consider him the most successful sniper in recorded military history. More than 500 confirmed sniper hits in just over 3 months of combat. An achievement that remains almost impossible to match. But perhaps the most remarkable part of his story is not the number of shots he fired. It is the mystery that surrounded him. For months during the Winter War, an entire invading army searched the forests for one hidden soldier. They sent snipers. They fired artillery. They searched endlessly through the snow. Yet the man they called the White Death remained almost invisible. A silent figure hidden in the frozen forest. Watching. Waiting. And reminding the world that sometimes, even in the largest wars in history, One soldier can change everything.